Welcome to the South Lyon Area Amateur Radio Club, where passion for radio communication meets community. Connect, explore, join.
All right, tonight's technical presentation, as we were talking, is Jim NHARD, and take it away.
All right.
Do we want, before you do that, do we want any of the lights off in here?
That would help.
Okay.
Is our presentation?
Presentation mode is half speed. Oh, that's the lights on. Let's turn those guys. Oh wow, that's very
Much better.
I might need some lights so I can show the things that I have in front.
Yeah.
Do we have the backlights? There we go. That's
Are we good?
Yeah.
that works. You guys can see it? All right. You ready to launch?
I'm good. You good?
All right, guys. Tonight, we had a technical presentation last month from Jerry. By the way, thank you, Jerry. Very technical, and I appreciated the depth that he brought to that presentation. This evening, I'm going to call this a bit of a dessert. It will be a little lighter for you all. It will not be as in-depth, but we're going to talk about a little bit of what everybody should know, which is the handy-talkie, the walkie-talkie, the handheld transceiver, which is how much HT do I need? And what I'm building up right now is, of course, the BaoFeng UV5R, perhaps the quintessential starter HT. This costs all of 20 bucks. And everybody that gets into this thing ends up with one of these first, some way or the other. Someone gives it to them. They might win it at the end of a club meeting, like this evening. And this is a fine handy talkie. But let's talk about why you might look beyond this once you get more serious about your license. So let's get into this here. So where did the handheld transceiver come from? Of course, two-way radios developed a long time ago by the military as backpack radios carried by soldiers into war, right? An infantry squad to keep in contact with a commander would have a handheld radio. And of course, I always appreciate kind of where the origins of these types of things come from, right? The HT is really credited to a Canadian inventor named Donald Haynes. And he was the first to create a portable radio signaling system for his employer. Of course, he was working at the time, and he was compensated to do so, CMS, in 1937. So back in 1937, we created the first handheld transceiver. They called the system the pack set, and later on, it would become known as, of course, a walkie-talkie. So I just like to start with a little bit of history here. Not a deep thing. This is straight out of Wikipedia. You could all look it up by yourself. But that's what this is. An HT is a handheld transceiver. It's a handheld radio, a walkie-talkie. You can call it whatever you want. It's a way that you can stay in touch when you're on foot, and it's a very portable way to run your radio, right? There are many ways to eat a Reese's here. There's a couple of things that you think about when you end up buying these, right? What is my budget? At the beginning of the day, I might say, I don't know much about radio, and I'm going to spend $16 on Amazon to have this tiny little thing delivered, and it will probably do a lot of the things that you want it to do. For 20 bucks, it's a dual band radio that operates in analog mode and allows you to put a tone code in so that you can talk to most of the, what I'll call, tongue-in-cheek modern repeaters that are online today, right? Even though our MyCore repeater might be at this point, how many years old?
A little long in tooth.
A little long in tooth, right? So this can do many of the things, right? And so when I'm buying an HT for the first time and I don't know necessarily how much I want to spend, how serious I am as a radio operator, this is a great option. It's an excellent way to get started. There are some downsides to these, namely, they are spurious, right? These are straight out of China. They are not passed by the FCC. We all know that when we buy these, that these are noisy radios, right? They're not good transceivers as far as that is concerned. Some are better than others, and there are many clones that can be bought. This particular one is the least expensive one that you could order online. And like I said, it's kind of a starting point. But what is your budget, right? When we talk about radio, that's always a question. How much do we want to spend? Is it 50 bucks for a handheld? Is it 150 bucks for a handheld? Is it 300 bucks for a handheld? Or is the sky the limit, right? And many of the times we might have a significant amount of money to spend, just depending on how excited we are about the hobby at any given time, right? I understand that there's many reasons that would influence your budget. The next thing that you might think about, and I personally think that this is probably one of the top and most important things you're thinking about, is how many bands does this transmit on, right? Most of these cheap ones will transmit on two bands, 2 meter and 70 centimeter, right? 144 megahertz, 440 megahertz, give or take. And these are generally two-band radios. For the most part, when you go and buy one of these, it's going to be a two-band radio. There are exceptions to the rule. There are exceptions on one end or the other, right? You might find a single-band radio. In fact, I think we have one right here, right?
It's 2 meter.
2 meter only, right? We have a single-band commercial radio. These are built with the intent to be durable, to be usable by folks that don't know anything about radio, but need to be able to use them reliably in the field, right? So single band radios, those things exist out here. Then we have things like this. We'll talk about this in a little bit. Tri-band radios, right? You get 2 meter, you get 1 1/4, and you get 440 as well. So you're getting all of those VHF and UHF radio modes. 220 megahertz right now is a less popular radio mode around these parts. There are a few repeaters that are still stood up today, but for the most part, it's hard to hit a 2 meter, 1 1/4 meter repeater. But tri-band is a really nice thing to have in your back pocket because you can also operate simplex, right? On 220 megahertz. How much power output do you get out of this? Now, I said this particular guy, we're moving beyond the BaoFeng tonight, 4 watts, right? They advertise it as a 5. It's about a 4-watt radio, realistically, one way or the other. And that's in the most optimal conditions, right? So these are not powerful radios. How much do handhelds go up to? Well, you can get one that says 8 or 9 watts, but realistically, you're making compromises no matter what. It's a small body radio that doesn't have the ability to sink heat properly most of the time. And so what you find is the output might start a little bit higher, but as you begin to transmit and have a little rag shoe here or there, you feel this thing getting pretty warm, and your power is going to be diminished. So generally speaking, it's a 5-watt radio, give or take. Most of these on the table tonight are 5-watt radios. You can find a little bit more. You can find a significant amount less if you get yourself a little tiny credit card transceiver like Alinco's DJC7, which was released many years ago. This thing is tiny. It's thin. If you took the antenna off it, you could probably stick it in your shirt pocket. And you might be able to go to a wedding and nobody would know, right? But you'd still be listening to whatever was happening on the South Line repeater. These are 300 milliwatts, right? These are small, low power radios. These are great radios for connecting to a node, right? An all-star node, an MMDVM node, depending on what you're doing. These little radios are kind of neat. Yaesu has a couple of options as well. And then, of course, what are you operating? Analog, basic FM, or are you interested in operating in digital modes? Are you interested in D-Star? Are you interested in System Fusion? Are you interested in DMR? Are you interested in, is Marty on here? M76, Marty? I think that's a thing. I don't know all of the digital modes. There are many and they're burgeoning. They are happening all of the time, but the most popular ones are going to be D-Star and C4FM, right? System Fusion. There are two that are backed by brands, ICOM and Yaesu. Kenwood, running right down the middle. Kenwood runs D-Star, right? So do you care if your HT, of which we have many here, has a digital mode available to you? And if it is not something important to you, you're going to find that you can save a lot of money in the long term. And you might find a radio that you love that's not digital. In fact, I have one here that I think is a pretty neat option. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So those are the main 4 things I think you need to think about. How much you want to spend? What bands do you want? How much power do you need? And do you care about digital? Those are the things that you might think about when you get started here. What else can you consider when it comes to an HT? Well, there's a kitchen sink full of things that you might consider. On the right-hand side of your screen here, you're going to see my APRS beacon, which is literally it's half a mile that way. That's my home. And that's where I beacon APRS from one of many of these radios that's capable of doing it. But these little guys have so many things that can be packed into them that they can become a sort of interesting shopping proposition. What do I actually want beyond just being able to talk on the repeater? It's a great question. This particular one here has GPS built in, but it has no APRS. How does it use GPS? Well, that's a darn good question. The KGQ10H, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, sends it in a very novel way, and you have to have everyone with KGQ10Hs in a talk group to make that actually a useful feature. Otherwise, this particular GPS implementation is not that important to me, and I would never consider it as a buying option, right? There are other things here. Automatic packet reporting system, APRS. I've said it over and over again already tonight. APRS is one of my favorite little modes. It operates in the background. It tells people where I'm at. what I'm up to. And in fact, you can give a little status message that says, hey, I'm listening to 147.040 plus 600, 110 PL. And that would then let folks know, if they don't know me, that NHGRD is monitoring on NSL, and I might be able to give them a call. Now, the other cool thing about APRS is you can send a text message, almost like you can on your phone, right? You can send a message that says, hey, how you doing? And somebody might send a message back. I've sent a few messages to Delegate KNX, Rory Uptown. We've played a little bit with it. I've sent messages to a gentleman that's very active in APRS in the Thumb of Michigan. And I said, hey, I always appreciate somebody that's active in APRS. Saw you guys were out walking tonight. Hope you're having a good evening. I sent him a little message and he replied. It doesn't happen like text. It doesn't happen quickly, but it's certainly novel. And I appreciate those types of modes. So APRS is a thing that some of these do. You might consider that as an important option. What else? Bluetooth is always ubiquitous, right? It's in your phone. It's in some of these. Bluetooth is implemented in many different ways in HTs, and I think that, in my opinion, it's not implemented to its fullest in most of the HTs, right? In many ways, Yaesu's Bluetooth implementation is very specifically linked to a way to connect to a headset that you put in your ear. That's the one way you can use it, right? When I think of Bluetooth, I think of many other things it can do. Can it program the radio? Can it talk to the radio as a modem? There are many ways that you might use Bluetooth, and some of the radios support that, and some of them do not. So when you see Bluetooth, look beyond the box, the setting, and say, what can that Bluetooth capability do for me? I'm not going to go down all these because I think there's a lot of detail here, and I don't want to bore you with all of it. But charging methods, right? When I slide this into a charger, is it a fast charger? Does it interface directly with the battery? I can drop it, go into a drop-in charger. That's a nice way to charge. But a lot of us now are looking for things that can USB-C charge, right? If I'm out in the field, I have my phone charger with me, but I don't always have my drop-in charger. And something like this can plug right into my same phone charger, and I can get myself topped off. And that gives me redundancy, right? Cell phone. And when this goes down, I have this that I can still operate. And I appreciate USB-C as a burgeoning standard for charging in this. There are many ways that it's supported. Here are two. There's another one over here that supports USB-C charging, and some of them go beyond it in that you can, at the bottom of the battery, specifically in these Chinese HTs, there's actually a USB-C input with its own built-in charging circuit in the battery, so you don't have to have it connected to the handheld itself. Really neat. Yeah, tons of ways you can charge. Built-in TNC modem, I already talked about that, right? The D74 is a prime example. It has a TNC built in that allows us to interface with WinLink through our handheld in the middle of the woods. So I might be able to send an email to Rory to say, hey, Rory, I didn't get eaten by a bear. Great. Excellent. There are many other ways that you do use a TNC. If it's not an APRS capable handheld, you might use that to simulate APRS through your laptop here. So there's lots of neat ways that TNC can be very interesting to use. It does give you expandability if you're operating FT8. Of course, I don't know how much FT8 happens on VHF, UHF, but it's possibility, right? It is out there. Other things, touch screens, color screens, IPX rating. So is it weatherproof? Is it not? This particular radio, the $16 handheld, if you drop it in the water, she's done, right? If you send it down the side of a cliff, she's done. If you get something like Yaesu's FT5, you probably have a little more peace of mind, right? It's weather sealed. If you take this battery off, there's gaskets on every piece of equipment inside of this. It's a well-built radio, and it's a killer option. Wideband receive is also a good thing to think about. Some of these basic, like these, UVs have very limited receive, right? They operate in the range that they can transmit. They operate in ham bands, and that's okay if that's all you're going to do with it. But if you're using something like a over here, a D74 at the top of the stack, it's a single sideband capable multi-mode radio in a hand. And it can receive well into the HF bands. You put a great antenna on top, right? Don't expect that this little guy here is going to get any sort of efficiency. You can't transmit in those bands, but it's certainly interesting that you can listen in those bands. And if you do have your end-fed half wave hooked up and you're laying in bed at night, you might screw the antenna on there and take a listen to what's happening on the SWL frequencies, right? Really neat. So you think about some of those receiving capabilities. And this is why I thought that this might be a curious conversation tonight is HTs do have a broad swath of things that they can do. It just depends on what you pick. A couple things I wanted to call out though, because we're going to talk about some handhelds that are not insignificantly priced. Some of them are expensive. And the programming method can be really important to you. So Does it take a proprietary program cable with a special little dongle in here that's probably just a couple of resistors and things to make it be special? I don't know. But you should before you buy it, because if you buy one that needs a special cable and you don't have the cable, it's certainly not fun to program every one of your 200 memories by hand, right? You need to know somebody with the cable, or you need to have the cable access yourself. There are many different cables. This is probably the most ubiquitous. It's what they call the Kenwood cable or the BaoFeng cable. It's a two-pronged cable. We're going to talk about programming methods. Some of these, like the TID Radio H3, can be programmed via Bluetooth. And with your phone, you can connect to this thing by Bluetooth, and you can literally type it in. And that's why I argue that some of these are great starter HTs for somebody that doesn't know much about radio yet, but has these two things and doesn't have much to spend. I can get the things programmed in locally, and I can start to understand whether or not I enjoy radio. So really cool ideas here. A couple other things here. Mars Cap mod, is it available? Can you do it? How hard is it, right? I just bought this particular radio here. Mars Cap is very difficult on this radio. It needs to be fully taken apart for that to be unlocked. What is Mars Cap? It allows extended access transmit-wise to the bands. You can listen often on all of these frequencies, but when we talk about, can I transmit there? Should I be transmitting there? Let's be more important here. That is something that might be important to you. I'm not a CAP member. It is not important to me that those are available, but it could be to you and as a buyer. And then, of course, app support for mobile. Like, is there an app? How does it hook up to my radio? What does it do? Those are things that we're thinking about. Okay. So a lot of things to think about. There's a whole thing that moves beyond this, which I wanted, again, tonight's supposed to be getting you thinking about buying one of these things. There's lots of features. Everybody can go look at the feature thing and say, hey, I love this. I want to buy it. But I want you to think about the things that are beyond that feature list and why they may impact your decision to buy. They might be things that you, who have bought 20 HTs in 6 months, might not be thinking about. I have a problem. I have a problem. That's it. I've admitted it here. So a couple of things that you might think about, right? Ease and familiarity of use. Graphical displays. I just bought this one. It's an ID52A Plus. It's Icon's top of the line handheld. It has a super nice graphical display that I can bring up. And in that menu, all the things that I want to do are going to show up right there as little icons. And I can motor around just like I'm using my iPhone. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Right? And I'll pass that around. You can push the buttons. If you transmit, we'll hear it all 7 times.
What was the bid for that? I'll say though, it has one downside. No touch.
No touch display. Right. Right. We talked about that. So a couple of reasons you might buy it, right? Like either familiar use, graphical displays, right? Little tiny TFT displays can make programming these things far more approachable. This is a TID Radio H3. It costs $30. It has a beautiful little color display, and it makes it very easy to program. We're gonna talk about why I like this one in a little bit. Proper documentation. I'm not gonna lie, guys, it matters. Yaesu does a killer job documenting their radios. Kenwood does a killer job documenting their radios. ICOM, again, does a nice job documenting their radios. There are the basic docs, and then if I go to Yaesu and I can say, I want an advanced doc on APRS, and there's a huge documentation that tells me everything that I need to know, all the settings and how they affect my radio. When I buy something like the TID Radio H3, documentation is fairly limited, right? The bottom line is there were far fewer people developing this particular radio, and therefore there's not as much support. There's not as much documentation, and that makes me think a little bit about whether or not I want to be the guy that comes up with all the understanding of this radio, right? We're going to talk about that in a few seconds too. And many manufacturers that we talk about here are recycling user experiences. So I am a Yaesu guy through and through. If you've seen my shack, I have a DX10, an MP101, I have an FT5D, right? These feel all the same when you use them, right? Yaesu has a very cohesive user experience, and when you operate the radio, they all feel very similar. And so I like that, in that if you're familiar with something that you're already operating every day, and you want to be an adept operator out in the field when it matters, buying one that matches the brand that you're already using makes a hell of a lot of sense. It makes a hell of a lot of sense, right? When I'm under pressure, I'm not going to remember how to operate Wuzon from China. I remember how to operate my FT5 that I've been operating all my other radios with for the last 2 years, right? It's simple facts. When the adrenaline hits, that's what's going to happen. Couple other things here. Are all of the features accessible by the HT? And this one came to mind really for me because I just bought the VRN76, the BaoFeng UV Pro. It's a radio that has been highly touted by all the ham tubers on YouTube. They're saying, hey, coolest radio ever, pay 160 bucks, gives you all these features. It's not that great. And the reason it's not that great is because it has a bunch of features, but how do you access them? You got to hook it up to your phone, and then you got to go into an advanced menu on your phone to program the radio. And none of those features can be seen in the radio itself. So there are things on these radios that cannot be accessed unless you have your mobile device, whether you have a programming device. Yeah. Just if you're interested, take a look, right? And so that's why I say programmability. I already talked about it, right? Does it take a special cable? There are many. This one is a 8-pin DIN cable. It was used on one radio Yaesu ever required. Stupidest cable ever. Cost 50 bucks to get. If you don't have it, well, good luck. This one here, same thing, 35 bucks, Yaesu non-universal, right? And do I need third-party software? When it comes to radios like the VX8G, Yaesu never produced an ADMS software for the VX8G. They didn't produce a free version of the programming software. At the time, you had to buy a kit from Yaesu for $100 that came with the programming cable and a piece of software. They're not negotiable. If you want to program it, you need the Yaesu stuff, unless you go find a third party that developed it, or you go to RT Systems, right? You use Chirp for some of these? Some of them you can. We're going to talk about Chirp. Some of them you can, some of them you can't. In the case of something like the AG, Chirp is not an option. And can I program it to my mobile device? Like I said, we talked about mobile. Can I program it there? Yes, I can. Thank you. All right, we're going to pass some more of these around. A couple other things, fast roll through here. Reliable manufacturer, right? I talked about it. You can hear me saying Kenwood, ICOM, Yaesu, right? Shouldn't be surprised, right? You know what you're getting with those guys. If you have a problem, you're probably going to be able to go and get some warranty support from them. Firmware upgradability, I stress it more than enough. These are firmware upgradable. If you buy a modern radio, you can upgrade the firmware. That means the software keeps up with what's happening in the space, right? DGIDs, things that are required for me to log into WiresX or System Fusion. Those things needed to be added by Yaesu after they released the radio, even though it supported C4FM as a modem. So really important to think about when you buy these things. Is it firmware upgrade? And then part support, right? I bought a ID52 a couple of months ago, and the top knob fell off. Bummer. It's a $500 handheld. I was pissed that the top knob fell off. What did I do? I reached out to ICOM and I said, hey, it broke. Could you help me with that? And they said, give me your serial number. I said, yep, here it is. They said, you're out of warranty. I said, okay, no problem. Let me buy it. They said, we do have it to buy, but we appreciate you buying an ICOM. Let me just send you this $3 knob. And they sent it to me, right? And that's what you get when you buy a well-supported Japanese radio. So I do encourage you to consider that when you're buying, but there's a lot of fun to be had in the other radios too, and we're going to talk about why. And then community support. This is what I think is really stand out for something like the TID radio, the BaoFeng UV5. These have community support out the wazoo. There are a ton of people that are super smart developing cool stuff for these radios that they move way beyond their weight class, right? The TID radio, it can be a much better radio, and I think it is. Than the UV5R, and there are many reasons why. Because these have third-party support, community support that's really important, and the accessibility means that it's not a barrier to entry for folks that are developing software. All right, we talked about programming. We'll bust through it here. This list on the right-hand side is all of the different programmers I have on my computer. You can see my P12 certificate for Logbook of the World, and below it, KGQ10H, H3, FTM 500, 400, 300, ADMS 14, FT1D, 52 plus, 52. There are more. I have 15 pieces of software to program my radios. What are the advantages of going with RT Systems, which costs us 25 bucks a license? Well, it's easy to move between these radios, right? And so there is an argument to be made. If you go buy a retail or a commercial piece of software for programming purposes, if I buy it, 25 bucks, 25 bucks, 25 bucks, you can see how it adds up, right? Or 200, 300 bucks for each radio. But when I have a 200 memory deep program for these things, I don't want to type that every time. My time might be worth more than that cost of the license. So it's really interesting. RT Systems is a great piece of software. I have a few of their pieces of software. I don't have them all, so I will only push so far. But as far as it's concerned, it is a great piece of software. And I know many folks, many hams that swear by it say that I have it for every radio. It is single platform, so I will call that out. That means if I'm a Windows user, then at some point or another, my PC breaks and I go get a Mac, well, I need a new license for every one of those radios. Unless I have spent $50 for their dual platform license, which is crazy to me. I think that that's probably something they could come around to. The other thing here, of course, it's highly interoperable between handhelds, so I can move my memories between these. It can certainly slot into each of these handhelds like a spreadsheet does. RT System does a killer job of making it a good user experience. And as we go along here, you'll see why some of those other. In fact, a lot of these modern HTs, and I say modern on purpose, are generally free. They offer cloning capability, including the custom settings for these, like my APRS settings, including my beaconing rate, my call sign, my D star, A, B, G, whatever the hell nodes they are, right? There's lots of things that are custom to this radio that the manufacturer software will clone out and allow me to reproduce on other radios. That's important to me in some cases. And they also support unique memory architectures where I may have multiple groups with multiple deep memory settings. So really, really something to keep in mind. I use manufacturer software wherever I can. I don't mind the sort of time cost to program these other radios, but I do see why some folks might favor that. And some of these things are very, they lack interoperability. Manufacturer software generally doesn't work well with other manufacturer software and doesn't give you a universally extensible format to export your files from, right? I can't export a CSV file from every one of these softwares in a format that's going to be easily recognized by Icon, right? If I'm using a Yaesu or Kenwood when I'm using an Icon, right? There's many reasons. Jason brought up Chirp, and it's an awesome thing. It's an awesome free software project. I recommend it. In fact, if you have a UV5 at the end of the night when you win this thing, you probably want to go get Chirp. I did pre-program it with 7 of the repeaters in the local area so that you can get started right away as you're driving home. But yeah, you don't have the cable, you can get going with the 7 that are in here. I think it's N8SL and N8DY and N8OBI and all those. There's a broad range of devices supported by Chirp, and I think they do an excellent job. It's easy to clone across hardware because, of course, it's the same piece of software that can open multiple radios. And your compatibility with features is generally good, but may be limited when you start to talk about extensible features like APRS, GPS, and additional options inside of these. So for simple radios, it makes a lot of sense, Chirp does. But for radios that have advanced functionality, I could argue there might be better options. So keep that in mind. Again, we're talking about buying. Okay. The heaviest of our conversation is done, and I promise to go quick here. Here's the chart, right? At the bottom of the chart, $16. Our UV5R, right? The TID radio sitting next to it at $30, and then right above it, the UV5R, which is an extremely popular option. I don't even know who makes that darn thing, but it's a super firmware extensible radio, and it has a bunch of open source software projects that have made it essentially like a Kenwood as far as like sideband capable, wide receive radio, and you can get that thing for $35 on Amazon. So the bottom of that tier there, they're very inexpensive. They're Chinese radios. They do have some spray submissions, give or take, but they're pretty neat for the money. You get up into the mid range here, and we go from 100 to $200. You'll see the UV Pro or the NR76, which I had just talked about. It's a neat radio. I think for a brand new ham, it makes a lot of sense. Don't get me wrong. It's programmable on my phone, and it's an easy to program thing by my phone. The app is great. It does APRS, it does FM, it's a dual mode radio, and it has killer battery life. I did keep it for a couple days and play with it before I sent it back. It's a cool radio. It also wants to tip over like this constantly. So from a user perspective, I hate it, but that's a good option. It's $140. The Woosan KG Q10H is a quad bander we'll talk about in a second. The FT70DR, which I know Jason is a big operator and an awesome radio. It's a fusion capable radio for under $200. Killer deal. Up in the $400 range, you've got a lot of options. The FT5, the ID50A. There's a Anytone UV878 Pro 2, a killer radio. It's a really neat radio. I have not owned one. I'm not an Anytone guy, but I know a lot of folks that love them, and they are great DMR radios if you're operating DMR. And then, of course, we've got the Halo mode here, which is like, if I want to spend $600 on something that probably isn't worth $600, I can buy an ID52A Plus, right? It's cool. It sounds good. It is a really nicely built radio. Is it worth $600? When you look at all the other options, probably not, right? The same thing goes with this. the Kenwood. It's a $700 radio. And then down at the bottom, we have the Motorola Apex, which is the big mama of commercial radios, well over $2,000, depending on what model you get and which programs you have unlocked. So there's a lot of money that can be spent on HTs, and it's a broad range and a lot of duplication and functionality.
I'll add one thing. I think there's one category you missed.
Oh, go ahead, yeah.
There is between the 50 and 200.
Yeah.
There is a couple Yaesu lines in there that are below the 70. If they're still around, it's like the 60s.
Okay.
They still make the FT60.
Yeah,
60D.
the FT60.
Yep.
Still has some nickel-based battery.
Yeah,
And I have
but it is a very
two-band FM only.
two-band FM only.
Yep.
But it is a good, if you're trying to get something that isn't the Chinese
Super cheap
radio, but you don't want to jump into the high-end radio because you don't need all the features. It is a good middle ground in there to have.
That's a great point. Is there anybody else that has one that they feel like is underrepresented on the chart? We're going to talk about a few more, but go ahead.
So I got 65.
Yeah, okay, 65, yeah.
I actually brought an old one. This is a Yaesu FT530.
Oh, nice.
It's 30 years old.
Okay.
So it doesn't know anything about Bluetooth. It doesn't know if you programming. What's that?
Yep.
You cannot program it over a computer.
Yep.
But one of the neat things I like about this is one of the few HTs I've ever found that is truly it's full duplex.
Oh, nice.
And in fact, you can set it up to do crossband repeat. You wouldn't want to do it because the back of this predates the modern high efficiency FET
Power system.
So the whole back of this is aluminum and it does get hot very quickly,
Nice.
but it's still been a great radio.
Yeah, I got another one to suggest.
It's hard to represent all these because there are so many of them. Oh, sorry. Go Steve.
Yeah, Steve,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, there's a Yaesu radio called the FT4X, which is less than $100, which is kind of Chinese, I think, but Yaesu sells it, so it's got a lot of support. It's a nice little radio.
Okay. Thanks, Steve.
Couple other comments, if I may. One of the things that is whether you get 16 real DTMF keys or it's hard to use DTMF is something to consider on a radio if you're going to use it for things like controlling nodes, if you're going to use the DTMF features.
Yeah, that's a great point. It was one of the reasons that I really liked the 74 is because it has a full DTMF keypad. It doesn't require you to do some fancy footwork on the touchscreen with very sausagey fingers to type the things. Anyone else that has a one that they like that hasn't been mentioned that we should see? Oh yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yaezers are one that have trouble with all-star nodes or other
gee.
things.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it
All right. Well, I'm gonna move fast here because we've already talked about a lot of these. Oh, okay.
Can I say one more thing about programming software?
Hey, Steve, 1 second. What were you
Go ahead,
saying?
Steve.
Yeah, one of the things that I've noticed is that Yaesu says do not use chirp with their radios or you'll break it.
Oh.
And the head sales guy keeps saying that over and over and over again, trying to let people know that. Just be advised that he says don't use chirp with the Yaesu radio.
Okay. No. I always appreciate the wisdom, Steve. All right. All right, a couple things here. So 45 minutes past the hour. We have many radios in front of us, right? We've talked about this one. I summarized some of these because I thought, what are we talking about here, right? I said beyond the BaoFeng. This is a starter radio. More likely than not, in a local club, you might find a ham that has a UV5R that they'll give to you. Because they'll be like, hey, I started with this. It was a great radio, but I went and bought something else and I need to. I bought this because I had never used one and I was making this presentation, so I had to give it a shot. I went and had a QSO with Lewis the first night I had it. 10 minutes out of the box and said, you know what? I'm holding the wrong radio up. Here it is. This is the UV5R. Lewis, I asked Lewis, I said, can you tell that this is a $15 radio? And he said, no, if you hadn't said anything, I wouldn't know at all, right? It sounds great. I appreciate his honesty on that matter. I was surprised too. It sounds really good. It's a 4-watt radio. At my distance to the repeater, this is a powerful little rig to keep in my back pocket. And if it fell out of my pocket while I was out at a parade or climbing rocks or swimming, that wouldn't matter to me. I'm making those things up. There are many things that you might know about this, but it does have broad community support. There are many clones. And so if you are buying one of these, they come in so many different packages. They all look a little different. They all say UV5R on the nameplate, but it has a silver inlay here or a metal grill here, or it's this long because it has this much more battery on it, right? They're all pretty much the same inside, give or take, but there is a lot of cost cutting that has happened. Unfortunately, this design has been around for many years, right? And there are a lot of folks that are unlicensed that use these for all kinds of things, and that's why they've sold as well as they have. I don't encourage you to do so, but that's really why. They're a market leader because they're super cheap, they're super accessible, everybody can push the button and make a contact 5 miles away, right? Like, it's a good radio. It's a decent radio for the phone.
The worst thing I have with it, HPs already don't have a good front end on their receiver that accurate selective. That one's even worse.
Yeah.
So I found usually for transmitting or HP, it's harder to do. If you're in a noisy area like Southfield or Troy,
Yeah.
you won't hear. If you're out in the middle of the woods, because we use them on our G Club, you're just talking to
Yep. The other nice thing is if you're a GMRS person, right? If you've got a GMRS license, they're a hell of a radio for GMRS, right? And I know that we're going to argue that. So a lot of things that are positive about this. I have nothing negative to say about it. In fact, it's been a lot of fun to play with. It has a little flashlight on top. If you lose your keys in the leaf file, you can get them with this radio.
I will say that they, for years have been having issues with the admissions.
Yeah,
I
very suspicious. Yep.
They know, they got more forward every year in mentioned, and I think Nation, they have a testing. They have a testing site there. They'll plug it in, they'll run the tests on it.
You can see if you get a clean one.
Yes, they will not take it. It's just more for their information, and they want to test every HT. So they can learn. But I think when I had mine tested many years ago, they only have like 2 that day that ever pass it out of 50 or 60. So, you know, you might get a good one, but more likely not.
Yep.
So here's my thoughts. You know, we're using those to charge and to program hooking up to the iPods. I don't trust that they're not downloading. You know, if you're buying something, so there gotta be. And, you know, I just feel like Chinese products. That's fine. Sure.
It's a pretty inexpensive handheld. And like I say, I think that you should know that you're getting into that when you buy it, right? It's $17. I'll give you a better option here, which is, I think, and Jerry might agree with me on this because I know he brought his and has 3 of his own tonight. It is the TID Radio H3. I do believe that this is the new UV5R of now. I don't think there's a reason to buy this anymore if you're going to spend $30. Like, I just, this doesn't make sense. It's outmoded. This is a better radio. It is still spurious by most techs, right? There are some of them that pass. I don't know what the number is. It's not 2 and 50, but it's pretty close. But this is a better radio for a number of reasons, and I just wanted to call this out. And I think this is one of the things that you might take away tonight. If you haven't got one of these, it's neat. It is a very capable radio. It has a little color display on it. It's got a standard antenna connector, just like all these do, right? RPSMA, that you can screw on any old radio antenna, right? There's not much that's proprietary about this, and it's a hell of a radio for $30. I honestly.
Watch the antennas. They reverse the polarity, the male and female socket on the antennas. The BaoFengs are opposite of the Yaesu, for instance. So just be aware of that.
Yep. It is analog only HT, right? But it is a USB-C programmable HT, so no special cable required. And if you're really fired up, it has a built-in programmer that hooks up via Bluetooth to this and allows you to program it too for $30, right? It's not $150 and $30. This is a really cool radio. this is my NAGRD pick for $30 if you're gonna spend money on it. I probably should have bought that instead of this to give you guys tonight, but hey, you know, I was being cheap and I didn't have them. You can, yep. So these are all mode, well, not all mode, but they're wideband transmit radios, and it's very easy to do. It's a combination of buttons. Turn it on and say I want to hit unlock, right? So it'll go from GMRS to ham to fully unlocked Mars Cap with a UI selection in the menu. No electronic knowledge required. So you can pick between it, and it's really easy to reboot. These are also firmware upgradable. I said that that was important to me. These are constantly still getting firmware updates, and Jerry's down there is running an experimental firmware from a third party that gives it even more functionality and allows it to go up to almost 8 watts if you really want to burn up the
You
finest quick.
probably can't see it from that far away, but the display is quite different on this one from the production one that he has.
Yeah.
So it's by Nick Shore. There's a guy named Marcus that does that. And if you want to go down a technical rabbit hole fooling around with experimental firmware, it's only a $30 radio.
Yeah.
And if I blow it up,
You'll get enough.
but so far it's working great.
Does anybody, I mean, I know some of you own these. If you're not, you're welcome to take a look at it. You can throw it around. If you drop it, I'll be really mad. No, I'm just kidding. It's got a bunch of wideband receive. It's got FM radio receive. It's got airband receive. Yeah. Here's the passes around with the optional firmware too. So it's a really neat radio. And honestly, if you're going to buy one today, this is probably the one I'd suggest for cheap.
Sure, compatible.
Yes. Yeah.
Not with the modified firmware.
Not with the.
Yeah.
The modified firmware adds and takes away.
Yeah.
So it doesn't work with chirp and it doesn't have Bluetooth programming, but it does other things. So
Yeah.
What kind of other things?
sorry,
What kind of other things?
named groups that you can scan.
It is. It's a little longer.
That's nice.
That you can't do with any of these.
Oh, yeah.
radios.
So there's a couple of things there to think about.
GMRS, Air, all in one.
All right, let's talk about a couple of, like I said, we're not gonna talk about everyone here. The mid-range 4 is more option here is the one that I think the club has favored for a long time. There are a lot of folks in the club that now own one of these. It's the KGQ10H. It's a quad bander, so it'll do 6 meter, 144, 220, and 440 all in one box. It's an analog only HT. It's dual receive. It's PTT directly connected to A and B bands, so you can call both ways. Strangely, the buttons are reversed. I don't know why. You could fix that in the firmware, but it also doesn't fix it perfectly. So
Yeah, if you
strange.
fix it, but then plug in an external microphone, it's backwards.
it's backwards again.
So
It's not a perfect radio, but it's an interesting radio. It costs $200 give or take. On a good day, it's $189. On a bad day, it's about $230. It includes the battery, the charging dock, the antenna. On this radio that I'll pass around to you guys, I have a SRH 320A, which is a tri-band antenna from Diamond. It's one of the best antennas that you can get for a tri-bander at this point. And it's about $49. So this is a little bit of an expensive antenna. And it's also a little delicate, but it's a good antenna. It's USB-C charging, and it does require, unfortunately, one of these old school Kenwood plugs. But if you've already got one of these radios, you probably already have one of these in your kit. The programming ports are under screws. So you have to unscrew, then click it in, then rescrew when you're done. So it's not exactly easy to change, but it is a very neat radio. It's color, high contrast display. It's informational. The colors can be customized, and it has like 999 memories. So it's a neat radio for the money. $200. I wanted to put this out here because I was kind of a late adopter on this. They just came out with one called the KG935H. It's basically the same radio, but you omit 6 meter. And if you don't care about 50 megahertz, which for a lot of HT users, 50 megahertz is kind of a limited band on this type of antenna, you might find the 935H, which is $50 cheaper, gives you the tri-bands that you care about, which is 144, 220, 440, in a very similar package. So just put that out there. Might be an option for you. But this is the club favorite. There are a lot of folks in the club. Eric has one, James has one, Mike has one, Lewis has one, I have one. There are others that have them.
one of the reasons we like them in the club is if we're doing a photo activation, and we're at a remote site, we can get, 4 bands really quick between people and, work a site and get in and get out. So that is why we have started adopting them.
So really neat radio for the money. This one's, like I said, $200. It is a club favorite. I don't think you can go wrong buying this radio. And honestly, I've kind of beat the heck out of mine since I got it in December because I didn't really care much for it or about it. And it's given me a pretty. I like it now. I'll say that. The more time I spend with it, it's a nice radio.
You gotta be used to its quirks.
There you go. All right, here we go. There's another mid-range option, which is to not buy a new one, but to look at all the vintage.
Oh, wait, there you go.
There we go. There's another mid-range option for you guys, and that is to not buy a brand new radio off the shelf, but to go look at all the cool stuff that's been out there for a long time. And this is where I think the hobby can be really interesting. This expands well beyond like the $200 mark. It can go down to $50. In a ham swap, it can go up to $300 depending on how desirable the old radio is. But there are many cool ones out here. And in the mid-range, it's really easy to find something like, let's find it here, the VX8G, or I'm sorry, the VX8R rather. That's a quad band radio that is about as small as any dual band you'll get today, and is also capable of APRS, is capable of doing GPS. It's a really, really cool radio. Yaesu was way ahead of their time with this one. It's a neat option, but there's many, right? There we go. You can pass this guy around. Again, this is where it starts to get interesting. You have to play the market on these ones. Send it to Jerry for me.
Yep.
And so you can look at all these. The ones that I have pictured here are just a smattering of them, but you can find unique features like size, functionality, arts functionality, which is Yaesu's old like group mode. You can find a bunch of cool things that if you're interested in digging into it, they can be pretty neat. The VX3 is a fine example. The DJC5, which is the predecessor to the DJC7 you see here, even cooler. When I'm at Handvention, I'm looking for that radio. I don't care what it costs. I'm going to get it just because I think it's novel. And then the VX5, which is my first radio ever. It was an awesome little tri-band radio that's capable of doing a bunch of things. All right, we have 3 minutes left. I'll give you my pick. This is my pick for $359. If you're going to buy a radio that does everything, the FT5D is a really killer value. It's a dual bander. It does fusion. It is a true dual bander, APRS, GPS, color touchscreen, battery, antenna, holster, SD card, Bluetooth firmware, all the stuff. It is the cheapest kitchen sink HT you can put your money on right now that is going to grow with you and is going to be a reliable IPX capable rig. So the FT5D, which is right here, is a definite winner in my category. I think it's right down the middle. $350, a lot to spend on an HT, but if you're going to buy one, this is a really good one to buy. And you can pass that guy around too.
I will roll one.
Nice.
3D.
Yep. So if you're going to use route and you want almost as similar as the predecessor to it, which is the 3D. I have one here you guys can compare afterwards. There's a couple slight differences.
Yeah. I agree completely. I think the 5D and the 3D didn't separate themselves well, but in today's market, the 5D brand new out of the box with a warranty is hard to argue with for $350.
Right.
They're super easy to use. Yeah. Programmable, and fusion is extremely easy as a digital mode. All right. We're nearly at the end here. This is the last one. This is the one where you guys are going to laugh a little bit. These are the Halo handhelds, right? Money is no object. I'm just throwing money at it because it's ridiculous. The D75, the D74, these are those types of machines. They're generally going to offer one extra mode, or I'm sorry, one extra band, which is the mid band, 1 1/4. They're going to offer digital support like the other ones do. They're going to offer true dual band, but they're going to also offer digipeater functionality, APRS functionality, KISS TNC functionality, full DTMF keypad, which Steve talked about earlier, which can be really important depending on what you're doing, color screens, firmware upgradable, USB-C. I mean, they do it all. They are literally kitchen sink level HTs. They come with that price tag. I don't know what Kenwood's making on each of these, but it with all the stuff built in and all the chips they have built in here, it's got to be a little. So if you shop around, something like the used D74, which is very close to the D75 now, can be had for $400, which starts to make more sense. But if you're looking at a brand new D75, you're probably looking at greater than, and this is Rory's, so you can, it's not turned on, but you can see it's one of those things that you could spend some money on it. And if you're looking for the ultimate one, that might be the one that you're after. But we had to make this happen in an hour, and I think we just barely did. So there it is. Go forth and be portable.
All right. Before everyone leaves, Let's see here if I can get this to share.
Oh, yep, we got the,
Can you stop sharing?
yep. All right, who wins?
I don't know why you're not seeing my screen.
Wait, is it just lagging?
I will reshare it. I'm just gonna show
Oh, there it goes.
Okay,
Are we ready?
Okay, how did you set that up?
The wheel of names.
wheelofnames.com. I just like
Wheel? You did it on what? Wheel of,
wheel of oh,
you just type them all in?
That's cool as heck.
Okay. Is it linked? It's thing or? I'm gonna find it on this wall. It stops.
Is that the winner?
yeah. Do you want us to respin?
Yeah, I've only got two bales.
Okay, all right.
Somebody else.
Spin it again.
Spin again.
Cutting it, right?
Remember, you can always take it home and reprogram.
Oh.
Spencer, do you need a BaoFeng?
I think we should give it to the new Handheld.
Oh,
Right, give it to this guy.
There we go. Spencer has, that's all right.
take it.
Thanks, Spencer.
All right. With that, I will open the floor up for any questions for Jim on this.
Yep, so thanks everybody for sitting through it. I know, like I said, it's kind of a buying guide, but hopefully, so a couple things that you might have thought about that you didn't think about when you're buying. I know a lot of us already have one, so there might be duplication of knowledge, but keep it in mind in the future, and I'm excited about it, so maybe you are too.